All right, we are live with Charlie Morgan. Charlie, it's been a year. How are you?
Yeah, it's been 11 months and 27 days, if I'm not mistaken, since I first reached out to you.
Exactly.
What
Exactly.
a strange sort of full circle to come by, hey?
Yeah, absolutely. So just for everybody watching, the way how Charlie and I met was almost exactly to the day a year ago when Charlie sent me a cold email, and I was like, damn, that's a really good cold email. So not only did it kind of hit exactly the right tone with me, but it also had this pretty amazing Loom thumbnail where my website was scrolling up and down and I could see Charlie's image on it. And I was like, damn, how the hell does he do that? Either he just does it all manually. Anyway, so that was how we met. How have you been doing since then?
Good, man. Like, incredible, actually. We didn't realize that we sort of visualized the future of the company, but we didn't think we'd come as far as we had in a year. Because when we were sending those looms out in April, when we reached out to you just under a year ago, we didn't really have a product. We didn't really have a community. We didn't have a brand. We didn't have authority of any description. We kind of just had some systems that had worked for us and a lot of confidence. And it's kind of strange to think that a year later, here we are, and obviously, it's still working to this day. But yeah, I've been really good, man. How have you been?
Yeah, that's excellent. Excellent. Yeah, no, really good as well. I was very impressed in one of your latest videos. And by the way, your videos are now pretty much staple viewing for me anytime a new one comes out. Everybody should follow you on YouTube. You put out really good videos. And one of the recent ones was so impressive that I was thinking, it's just I have to get you on the live, because that's where you said that within 15 months of launching Imperium Agency, you got to a monthly revenue of, did I get that right, 195,000?
Yeah, so just for transparency, that's not cash collected, it's contracts collected, right? So I said that in the video because it's quite easy to pull the wool over people's eyes and say you make a certain amount, like, for example, so we signed 28 clients at around $7,000. That's not like, some of them pay in full, most of them pay over like a certain payment plan. So, but technically in like lifetime value or in cash committed to us, which is almost always like 100% contract value, we made $195,000. That's the nature of the high ticket world, I suppose.
And that is really amazing to get there in 14 months. So if you could, just for the benefit of our listeners, describe what you do and what was your journey. I was really intrigued by your whole story about that fateful conversation you had at the McDonald's. So if you could, maybe for the benefit of our listeners, I know your story by now quite well, but if you could go a bit of a Cliff's Notes of it, how have you started and what is the business that you're running now?
Yeah, of course. Well, I guess the easiest way to sort of do that is to take it back a couple of years. I won't save anyone who wants to watch the story video, just pop in my name and then just type in story, it should come up. But the McDonald's conversation you're referencing to was a conversation with a friend of mine called Will. We used to do this McDonald's Friday where on high school or college, we'd walk and we'd go to McDonald's. Fortunately enough, I don't still have that habit. And we had this conversation. We were like, what do you want to do with your life? And then I remember Will was describing this sort of, just normal life, no judgment for that. And I was like, that's not for me. So we sort of had that chat. I became aware that not everybody wanted like what I wanted. And that sort of gave me this discomfort. That then led on to me starting a marketing agency. My first year in business was okay. I made, a couple of grand a month here and there. But it wasn't until I partnered up with my current business partner, Bo, that we really started to scale. And then fast forward to now, we obviously have transcended the Done For You agency. We still have NorthFlow Consulting, it still operates. But we now run Imperium Agency, which is our main focus, which is basically where we help agency owners do what we've done. That's the verbatim of the story. I'm more than happy to go into any specific details if you'd like.
Yeah, I would be particularly interested in the fact that I believe, did I get that right? You're 23, right?
Yeah, actually, I'm 24 in 6 days, but you can say 23 in this video because I technically am. So
awesome. Good. So this is just incredibly impressive to me, especially when I think back on what I was like at age 23. So that's definitely miles ahead of that. I would love to know, like, how did you get those first clients as a presumably, what was that, 18, 19, 20-year-old? How does anyone give you the keys to the Mercedes, so to speak, when it comes to helping them grow their business? How did you get your first clients?
So it was just an awful lot of persistence. I remember when, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm renowned for my sales knowledge, but I'm half decent when it comes to sales calls these days. I'd like to think with like a 40% conversion rate. But when I started, I didn't really know what I was doing. The only thing that really fueled me was just persistence and pain, which is a pretty good recipe for success, in my opinion. The way I got my first like 5 clients was through cold calling, because at the time when I was starting my marketing agency, I was also doing an apprenticeship in sales for a marketing agency, which was extremely useful. But I remember what I would do, this was my day for about really 8 months, is I'd get up at about 6 in the morning. Usually around like 5:30, because I wanted to go to the gym before my work, right? So I get up at 5:30, I go to the gym for 6, back for 7. Then I would drive so my work day, my apprenticeship didn't start until 9:30, 9:30 a.m. The reason it started at 9:30 is because, like, the philosophy was that people aren't going to be answering the phones until like 10 a.m. By the time you've got in, they won't be answering at 9 o'clock. So that worked in my favor. So I'd get to the office, then I'd arrive in my car outside of the office at about 7:30. I would then spend the next 2 hours cold calling, usually to Australia, because that was when gyms were open in Australia and they could answer. And they'd be like, "G'day, mate," and I'd be like, "Oh yeah, I'm from the UK." And then so that was that. I also would call gyms that I knew were open really early, so I'd like source them and find out which ones had early classes and stuff, so I could call them. And I do 2 hours of straight cold calling. Then I would start my apprenticeship and cold call for this agency, for my boss, from 9:30 until about 1. Then on my lunch break from 1 until 2, I'd eat for 5 minutes, and then I'd do cold calls again from 1 till 2. I'd literally just get in my car and then I'd just make phone calls. And I remember the first client I signed was a guy called Ian Glass Fitness. Ian's awesome. He was great. He was my first client. And he bought from me, and like, it was the result of just this sort of daily cold calling. And then I'd finish my apprenticeship, I'd finish the work at 5:30, I'd drive home, I'd do another like 3 hours of cold calling. That was my life for about 8 months. That was what, and it was just, I get on these sales calls and I didn't have any idea what I was doing, and I didn't know how to sell, but I think it took me about 30 or 40 calls to land that first client. And it wasn't until like I got the client and I was like, oh my goodness, like this is actually working. And that client then gave me this confidence, and then it just started to sort of snowball. And then eventually we've signed over 350 gyms between now and then. So something works.
Why did you pick gyms in the beginning?
I picked gyms because I understood them. I think there wasn't really any critical thinking behind it. I think it was just more of like, I knew I needed to have a niche because I'd watched some YouTube videos. And then I was sort of thinking like logically about it, like, where's the overlap between what I know, what I'm interested in, and where I know I can make money? And that was obviously with gyms. So I knew that I went to the gym and I understood gym owners. I had, in fact, a few of my friends were actually personal trainers and starting gyms, so I knew that. And it was just more of like I feel like when you pick a niche with an agency, like you genuinely could just make, and I'm not even joking, you could put 30 post-it notes on a wall with all the niches, shut your eyes and throw a dart and pick the niche it lands on and still make 100K a month. People think niche selection is this like magical, strange thing. But honestly, like the best niche is the niche that you stick to for like 2 or 3 years. That's my philosophy for it. I'm like, what's the best niche? It's like, there's no such thing as the best niche. The best niche is the one you stick to, because like it's always going to be the worst in the early stages,
Wow, that's really interesting. But also in one of your videos, you mentioned that one of the reasons why you started Imperium is that you yourself had a marketing agency and you knew how to grow it. And that therefore you were more comfortable, or I don't know if I'm quoting you correctly here, but that because you had gone through that, now Imperium is arguably more successful than NorthFlow because of that identity, because you've done it.
Yeah, 100%. I think like it's hard to compete with someone who is your like if you've got a competitor who technically is your market, it's hard to compete with them. So like Imperium, the amount of success we've had in a short period of time, in my opinion, like obviously we started Imperium like a year ago, 14 months ago. We're now making multi 7 figures a year, 100, 200K a month. However, like we've been building this business technically for 6 years because we've been building the understanding, and like the last year of Imperium was hard and it's taken a lot of work to build, but we've heavily leveraged our suffering from the 5 years prior to that. And like that feeds into our sales process and understanding people. It feeds into I know agency owners inside out because I am one, right?
Yeah.
And so when I'm talking to an agency owner, like I can hop on a sales call and then like they'll say something and I'll be like, okay, that's that. And I know you're going to say this next. And like you understand all these patterns because it's who you are. So we looked at the gym niche and we realized that we could never really own the gym niche because we'd never owned a gym. So we were competing with people like Alex Hormozy, for example, and there's some other ones. But that's deterministic because my psychology is I want to take a market and own it, but not everybody needs to do that. So you don't have to like be the market to own, like you have to be the market to own the market, but you don't have to be the market to make 100 grand a month. But if you want to build an 8-figure company and become like the leading authority, you can't really do it without knowing, like being the person that's, because it's also a good story. Like we had to leverage that to begin with. Like why should anyone trust us? It's like, well, we've got NorthFlow Consulting, like we've scaled this, so
yeah. Okay. Very interesting. Yeah, because I think many people are struggling with that, even including myself early on, choosing the niche and that is such an interesting perspective that you say you can literally just throw a dart on it, because you always feel like it has to be something that is like really close to your heart. But one of the things that I always like to now, especially in hindsight, I'm thinking you're going to actually start enjoying and loving the niche that you choose. And it's not that you first have to fall in love with it and then you choose it, but you simply choose it. And gradually, as you learn it, as you get to know the pain points that people have in it, you get to really enjoy it and become really good at it. But you first have to make the rational decision.
Yeah, exactly. I think familiarity is what builds love. Now, it is like one thing that is really helpful, like because you do need to love the niche you're in, right? There's an element of that where there's a huge advantage to actually like liking the market, because the last thing you want to do is work with a group of people that you don't like. That's not a good thing. But the overarching thing you should love is changing people's lives. And you can do that in any niche. The cool thing about fitness for me is I know that every time I generate a lead, it's a potential life changed. So it's not just like the actual client, but it's like the people I'm introducing to the client that also benefit. But I've realized with niche selection that people just make too big of a deal. Like if the goal is just making 10, 20 grand a month, 30, 40, 50 grand a month, the best thing to do is just pick, right? And sure, like it makes sense and it is really useful to have a niche that you're interested in and you love. However, like what you should really fall in love with is the underpinning personal progress that you'll experience as a result of starting the business, because nobody truly loves their niche entirely. Like we all hate our niche a little bit, right? They've all got problems, they've all got difficulties and annoying things. I'm sure you can relate to that as much as I can. Not that I hate agency owners, but like I know what our flaws are because that's what I am, and it manifests and it can get frustrating. But there's no perfect niche, and the best thing to do is just pick, because people spend like 3-4 weeks picking a niche. I'm like, dude, you could have sent like 500 cold emails by now,
Yeah, exactly. One thing that I just quickly wanted to remark on, which was really impressive, is that you said after 40 or so calls, you had your first client closed. I think one of the things that separates you from many others is that somebody who would have done 30 calls would have probably thrown in the towel and said, this just doesn't work, if ever they had gotten to 30 calls. And I think it is a hallmark. No, how would I say? It's a sign of your persistence and tenacity that you just, and actually of your great mindset that you, after 40 calls, thought, hey, I closed one. It's amazing, right? That you are so positive about it.
Yeah, I was talking to my business partner about this, because one of the worst things that can happen is that you close a client really quickly. So if I closed a client in those first like 3 calls, I would have then had to go like 37 without a single client. And then I'd be thinking, did I just get lucky? Like, because my paradigm was like, I knew that all I had to do was talk to enough people with the problem that I was trying to solve, and something would happen. And the goal at the time was not to sign a client. The goal was to just do the calls. So in my mind, because I recognized that, right? So it's the same thing with my YouTube channel, for example. I don't have a subscriber count, I have a video count. So I don't care about hitting 10K subs, I just care about making 1,000 videos that are good, for example. But that was my philosophy for the calls. It's how I rationalized it and put up with the pain of it. Is I wasn't looking for clients, I was just looking for sales calls. And then what would happen is, like, even if, like, 20 calls in, I'm like, I wasn't thinking like I haven't signed a client. I was like, I've done 20 calls. How cool is that? Like, oh my God, that's amazing. And that was always the objective, was just to do the work. Like, the outcome was obviously attractive and it was what I wanted, but I quickly realized that, like, you have to offset the suffering and the pain through some vehicle of, like, faith. And that has to be like, I'm doing the process, I'm doing it properly. So when we hire sales reps, for example, I say to them, I'm like, look, let go of the number, let go of the conversion number, just follow the process. The goal is to do each call as we tell you to do it. I don't care about what your conversion rate is, because I know if they follow the process and make the process the goal, the conversion rate will catch up in due course. It's when people become really attached to the outcome and the numbers and, the metrics, that they start to lose confidence and faith when that is out of alignment, because you can't really control that. You can only control your actions. So, I would have kept going for 100 calls if I had to, but, like, it was cool because I just saw it as like a learning curve. And I remember, dude, the feeling I got when I got that first client, I was like, I couldn't, like, sleep. And then it was great. And then, like, I think literally, like, within the next week, I signed a second one. It was a gym in Blackpool in the UK. My third client was a gym in Colchester in the UK, which is in a county called Essex. And it just, just snowballed slowly. And then I sort of came up for air, like, after a couple of months, and was like, oh, I'm making like $4,000 a month now. I can quit my apprenticeship. And yeah.
And you'll always remember the first clients. You will always remember them until the day you die.
I won't. I'll never forget that feeling. That like ear-to-ear grin. That, like, because I didn't even know what Stripe was at that time. I think I used Go Cardless, like, because that's what we used in my apprenticeship, like the marketing. So I remember I got like a direct debit payment of like £955 after their fees. And when that hit my bank account, like, I was like, dude, that's my, like, monthly salary. Because as an apprentice, I was making £3.50 an hour. So, like,
wow,
that's like,
that's
like,
legal.
Yeah,
wow.
well, if you're under, like, I think I was like 17, but if you're under like 20, so I was looking at that and I was like, yeah, this isn't sustainable. Like, I need to do something. And so, dude, I've always loved the work. I've always been in love with the game, and I accepted. I think, like most people, when they start an agency, they have really high hopes. The best thing you can do is to be pessimistic about your goals. You can still have big goals, but I think it helps to sort of offset that optimism slightly. Because most people start agencies and then they expect 10 grand a month within a few months, and it doesn't happen. And then we have the Stockdale paradox, which is where, like, the optimists die first, and it just creates this mess. Whereas I was like, look, I'm just doing this because I want to do it, and, like, it will work. I just have to give it time, and I'm expecting it to be extremely painful. And then it was extremely painful, but because I was expecting it, it didn't take me by surprise. So I just carried on going and carried on going. So you kind of just have to rationalize the pain and know it's going to happen, and then it's just that paradigm shift.
Did you have any role models or, like, mindset influencers at the time that you kind of were following? Where did you get the idea even from this? Oh, it's going to be so painful, I'm just going to be, live with the pain.
I'd read a lot of Stoicism. I've got, in fact, I can't see it. It's usually like by my bed. I've got Discourses by Epictetus. And I've read that book a lot. I've read a lot of Seneca. I've read a lot of Marcus Aurelius. I've read Meditations and stuff. I think that was where those ideas came from, of, like, seeking out painful situations. But dude, like, honestly, the real truth is, it's like, I think if you sort of weighed it up on a scale, like, I had, like, there was so much, I was in such a painful situation in my current existence with my apprenticeship, knowing that if I didn't make something work, I'd have to just go to uni, or I'd have to get a normal job. Like, the pain of that was just so extreme that I felt like anything else that wasn't that, even if it was painful, was not as bad. So, like, it was ironic, because there was a paradox in it, because by working and putting myself through the pain of starting the business, I was actually decreasing my pain, because I knew I was trying to do something to get myself out of the situation I was in. And I think, like, pain will teach you pretty much everything. And I was just there, like, going through the motions. And I think, that, and then, like, it was helpful to have an apprenticeship at the time because I had my mentor who was teaching me how to make cold calls and stuff, and that was really helpful. But other than that, I was just sort of like influenced by Stoics, and I had read quite a few books up until that point as well, which was really helpful. So
yeah. You're gonna undergo pain when you believe that with this you are avoiding another pain, or you are pursuing a greater good. Now, I wonder, why was the pain of living a normal existence even worse than the pain you were undergoing then?
Yeah.
What was it about having the proverbial 2.3 kids and the picket fence? What's so painful about that for you?
Yeah, I think what you mentioned is really well summarized by Nietzsche's quote of "He who has a why can bear any how." Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that okay, so I've thought a lot about this recently because I'm producing a mindset module for our program. And when I say mindset module, it's not just like a 10-minute video that says have a growth mindset and have a glass half full. Like, we're talking like 2.5 to 3 hour videos, like breaking down extremely complicated psychological topics. And one of those topics is an idea I've come up with called drive vacuums. The premise of this is basically where I've studied lots of like Freudian psychology, I've studied lots of Jungian psychology, lots of B.F. Skinner and all these other like child psychologists. And what I've realized is, like, when you're a kid and you're growing up, like, if you don't have something and you're lacking something when you're going through like early childhood or your teenage years, then like the adult you become will actually be built by your subconscious to take care of the child within. So it's Freud who sort of realized that, where he was sort of like, the person you are as an adult is basically like a manifestation of what you were missing as a child. So like we see this a lot where one of the examples that Freud uses a lot is like people that grew up without a father will have this intensive sort of like subconscious drive to be extremely like productive and really like give back to their family because it's what they were lacking as a child. But sometimes that manifests into the opposite behavior, so it's not always perfect. However, my point is that like I realized like the pain I had was I had these drive vacuums where I was like, my business was started, I'm not even afraid to admit this, it was started out of anger and insecurity. So I was angry at myself because like I didn't like, well, I was broke. I didn't have any money, which meant in turn I had no like status or authority. Also, I was awful with women. I had no confidence. And I'm not ashamed to admit that the reason that I was in this pain was because like subconsciously through my teenage years, I had no attention from women. I had no like money to do anything. I had no sense of freedom. Like I was quite restricted. Now my childhood and my parents were incredible. Like I can't fault them, but I ended up quite angry at myself because I didn't have what I wanted and I didn't have this female attention, and so I figured that by starting a business, I could fulfill those problems. And that was the sort of nature of it, I think. And like it manifests in a lot of different ways because some people go through like that, like they might go through their childhood and then like they haven't got any money, and then that manifests into them wanting to start a business so they can have the money to not go through that pain again. But the truth is that I just started a business because I wanted to get girls. Like that's not even like, looking back at it, like I think that's why a lot of people start. It's not for the female attention, but there's a reason. There's something they were lacking in their early years. It could be anything like safety or security elsewhere, and that then leads to them starting a company. And so that's why like I had this intense biological drive. The problem with that is once you fulfill that drive, all the motivation disappears. So I had this period of like where I was making like 10 grand a month consistently, and then suddenly I just stopped working and it all came crashing down, and I couldn't for the life of me figure out why I stopped. I realized like at that point I had the car, I had the watch, I had the female attention, and I had the status, and sort of then you lose it and then you cycle back through it. So you have to sort of rationalize those things.
Interesting. How did you bounce back from that? Okay, so you're making 10 grand, you fulfilled a couple of goals, and you sort of become lazy or demotivated. How did you then get yourself to the higher level?
Yeah, so you're basically like at that point, you're fighting comfort. People think they're fighting themselves, but they're fighting basically being comfortable. So what I realized is that I had to transcend my petty goals of personal. I had to get rid of I had to go beyond myself and start working for other people. So what I realized is now that when I was making 10 grand a month, like, because you give a 21-year-old guy or 19-year-old guy 100,000 a year, 80,000 profit, he doesn't need any more money. Right. Yeah. Just like you could buy a nicer car or something, but like when you get to that point, you have the money, there's no reason to keep working for yourself. So what you have to do is you have to extend your motivations beyond yourself. Now that you're taken care of, it's time to start taking responsibility for other people. So at that point, like, my family have always been pretty sorted and there's been no issues there. So nobody close to me was suffering financially and needed help, right? So what I started to do is I started to realize that my work, for me to start making more, it had to become a vehicle to alleviate suffering from other people. Now, that's why I'm so passionate about Imperium and why I love helping agency owners, because like the struggle and the pain that I went through and experienced, I can help people alleviate that. So now my motivation isn't financial. The money doesn't matter. Like I said, beyond 100 grand a year, like, what the hell more do you need? So it's now you have to transcend, and it's basically becoming a mission-led entrepreneur. And then you're getting up out of bed in the morning, not for yourself, not for your own personal gain, but so you can alleviate the suffering of people that you care about. Because there's a quote in Jordan Peterson's book, you may have read it, 12 Rules for Life, that says, what is it? It's like, it's something along the lines of like, treat yourself as if someone you're responsible for taking care of. But the issue with that is that once you've taken care of yourself to a certain degree, there's no real need to keep doing that. So you have to transcend it. And this is why a lot of people plateau at that sort of 10 grand a month, is because their drives are fulfilled. And there's nothing wrong with that. Some people are just happy, but I was like, you become, your identity becomes formed around this person who's conscientious and has grown themselves. And then you stop growing and it just creates this like friction where you're like, wait, I'm this entrepreneur, I'm growing, I should keep growing, but you're not, because you haven't got the unconscious drive. So you have to just do some deep thinking about like, who do I want to help? Who do I know I can help? What problem do they have? And then you just sort of unleash. So when I'm recording like 3-hour long mindset videos on a Sunday night, I'm not doing it because I want to make more money. I'm doing it because by doing so, I can actually help someone and can completely change their life. And that philosophy underpins the entirety of Imperium. It's how we sell, it's how we reach out, it's how we produce content, it's how we coach. It's all around changing the life of the person we're working with. And that might sound like some sort of salesy, like indirectly trying to promote my program, but it's the truth. And I think that's why we've seen so much success.
Did you say you reduced your mindset module recently?
No, we're releasing it.
Oh, released. Okay, so
Yeah.
because I thought you had said reduced. Okay,
No,
never mind. Is it annoying when people give you compliments about how like profoundly you think based on your age?
No, not really, because like I always seek to understand instead of judge. So like when you like, someone's knowledge isn't like a product of the length of time they've been on the planet. It's the length of time they've actually been trying to learn new things. And like, if you dedicate yourself to learning for like the way I see it is like, I can probably learn, no, that's an egotistical way of framing it. And I don't want to frame it like that. Basically what I'm trying to say is I've spent the last 7 years in a book, right? With my head in a book and all sorts of training programs and stuff. And like, it's hard to just like, and when people go and say, oh, you seem to know so much, you're so articulate for being so young, and like, so that builds some lack of trust. I don't really care. The honest answer is no, I don't get annoyed. I get flattered, which I kind of don't like, because that feeds this narcissistic loop that I'm trying to get out of. I usually don't have any, I'm trying to just have no reaction to it at all. You know, just because the like famous athletes say like, you shouldn't read good stuff, you shouldn't read bad stuff. So like at the moment, I kind of like have a look at my YouTube comments every now and then. I'm like, oh, great video. But I'm really trying to get out of the habit of doing that, because as soon as I think I'm making great videos, I stop making great videos. Yeah, it's like the father who thinks he's a good father is no longer a good father. So like, by thinking you're good, you aren't good, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, exactly. And this is exactly back to what you said, just follow the process, do the inputs, don't care so much about the outputs. And there's I don't know who said that, but it's this quote of, I think Dennis Prager said that. I like that quote. Don't let compliments go to your head, and don't let insults go to your heart. Right. So just treat it with a equanimity, and you're going to be fine.
Well, because like people's opinions, either good or bad, like they don't really matter. Like they're the only opinions that matter to me are the opinions of our clients to do with our program. And even then, like sometimes someone might be like, oh, this video is too long, but I made an extra 10 grand last month. So it's like, even then the opinion is still irrelevant. And like, yeah, I just try my best, because there's a quote from Viktor Frankl I like that says, between stimulus and response, man has the freedom to choose. And what he means is like, let's say someone insults you, it's like you actually have got the cognitive ability to decide, like, is that going to upset me or not? And like, it's
yeah, absolutely. And sorry to interrupt. And exactly at this point, most people stop because they think this is all about the insults, right? Or the negative stuff. My reaction, like, be a stoic, right? Many people know this. I think what not many people know, and this is also something that I've discovered recently, is that you should treat compliments in the same way. Right? Because that's so counterintuitive. That's so counterintuitive, because when somebody tells you a nice thing, you go like, you know, and instead that is a similar reaction to when you go, when somebody gives you a insult. So
100%. It's like, I think it's just best, like, you know what your goals are, you know what you need to do to achieve them. People's opinions tend to not matter. And like, it feels good, man. Like when you introduced me saying like your journey's incredible, Charlie Morgan's a phenomenal, like that feels good. And it does contribute in a way, because it reinforces this sense of identity that I'm producing good content. It's encouragement. So I think that you have to take a non-binary stance where like, you don't want to completely disregard what people are saying about you, because it could be useful feedback. So if you start a YouTube channel, like if you start a YouTube channel and then every comment you get is like, these videos are awful, then it might make sense to listen and make some adjustments. But like, I think it's, you can still receive the feedback, but trying to detach yourself emotionally from it, I think, is the key, because it's feedback, you know, it's just.
Absolutely. It's just information.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Let's change tack a little bit. Let's talk about your specific tactics. So you are obviously, for me, you are the outbound king, the cold outbound king.
Here we go again, all these compliments.
No, but can you tell me what of that revenue that you mentioned before, that very impressive revenue, could you give like a breakdown of how much of this comes from inbound? What other channels do you have? Could you give it like a pie chart picture?
Yeah, of course. So I say, so right now we probably get 25% of our business from YouTube and inbound.
Nice.
And then 75% of it is from outbound. Now, YouTube is like, well, we can explore this. I'm sure you've got some questions around how we balance it out. But like, YouTube's in this state at the moment, like my channel, where it's still in the earliest days, and it's actually picked up a lot in the last couple of weeks in terms of how many appointments we're starting to book from it. But like, when you start a YouTube channel, you have to just come to terms with the fact that it will not contribute significantly for like 3 years. Because what will happen is in 3 years, that will shift from being 25% inbound, 75% outbound, to 75% inbound, 25% outbound. If that makes sense. So that's the way it's done. I mean, Bo and I, this is really interesting, right? We calculated this literally like a couple of hours ago. So we were discussing YouTube, my business partner. We realized that so since starting my YouTube channel, we've probably converted and closed, I would say, I mean, let's just be extreme. Let me just run some numbers here. Let's be extremely conservative. So let's say we've probably, okay, let's just give an estimate. So we know we've probably booked about 100 calls from YouTube since we started. Now, I know for a fact that our sales conversion rate on YouTube calls is significantly higher. So we can probably deduce we've signed about 40 clients from YouTube, right? And that's like still being pessimistic, but this is really interesting, because even pessimistically, so our program is, let's just say it's $6,000. It's a little more than that, but you know, we did close at like $5,000. Now we close at $7,000, so in the middle somewhere. But since starting the channel, we've probably signed 40 clients at $6K. So we've made around like $240,000 from YouTube. Now, what we can do then is we can actually break it down to how much we've made per view, which is really interesting. So if I've made $240,000, I know for a fact right now I've had about 38,000 views in total. What that means is each view is worth $6. So every time someone clicks on my video to watch, we make $6. Now you can take it a step further, because I've got right now about 810 subscribers, which means each subscriber is worth just under $300. So like every time I get a subscriber, I don't see a subscriber, I see $300. And this is how you can really gamify stuff. And like it really makes it quite rewarding, because like you look at a view and you think, oh, cool, that's like $6 basically.
Yeah, but there's then the risk of focusing on the outcomes, right? You may stray from the inputs of just producing great content. You think, oh my God, another subscriber.
Yeah, I think it's like, it's useful because like we're not really attached to the subscribers or the views or how much money we make from them. That was just an exercise we ran just to assess the power of it. Because people were like, well, how much has YouTube actually contributed? Because I wanted to figure it out before we hopped on this call, because I know you're going to ask me about it. And that was like, it's just good. I feel like sometimes it's helpful for people to put something into a financial sort of frame where it's like, damn, like a subscriber worth like $300. But like, truth is, I couldn't care less how many subscribers I have. Like, the only thing I care about, and this is also Mr. Beast's philosophy, because I've studied him a lot as well with YouTube. Mr. Beast's philosophy for YouTube is like, the only thing he cares about is making good content people enjoy. Like, if you watch any of his interviews on YouTube or anything, it's always just like, the goal is always just to make fun videos that people want to watch. So that's just the goal. And it's the same with our outbound. We don't like, the goal is not to book meetings, it's just to send emails, you know?
Okay. So you're focusing on emails and YouTube as your two channels. Sorry, I
was going to say, we've also we've got 3 setters managing 4 accounts collectively. 2 of them don't send a huge amount of volume, one of them sends a lot of volume. So we also have those channels as well.
And that's on LinkedIn or Facebook or where?
LinkedIn and Facebook.
Okay, good. And any idea how much that contributes? Yeah,
so like the split between email and the setters is probably about 50-50.
Oh,
so
wow.
Really cool to break it down. Like, you could say like YouTube is like 30%, outbound setters 30%, looms 30%. The truth is that we could just do looms to fill up our entire pipeline, right? We could just do setters to fill up the entire pipeline. But the secret to our success, I think, is we have our finger on the pulse of all of these systems that we're teaching. So like, we want to have a loom, even like we may not like, the truth is we could just run YouTube ads and never touch outbound again or inbound, right? We could get rid of the whole thing. But I want to be managing setters and I want to be managing a system with looms, because if something goes wrong, then we fix it for ourselves, which means when clients have that problem, we can help them solve it. So it's also why like I'm going through the process of like writing all my own YouTube titles, planning out my own YouTube videos, because like, it takes time, but when I come to teach YouTube to clients, I understand it inside out and I haven't outsourced the understanding, so I can actually educate people on it and teach it. So that's why we still have all those systems.
Which also takes care of my next question, which is, why are you not doing any paid ads? Why is that not part of your mix? I guess that's because your clients are probably simply not there yet. Is that right? Or do you have any other reasons?
Well, the pure reason is that we haven't really had to. We could, and we could just grow and grow and grow. But we've come to terms with the fact that like, when you, even with coaching businesses, there are limits. Like, you have a burnout limit, you have biological limits. And so Bo and I have discussed this at length. Like, instead of seeing business as like this thing that you grow and grow and grow and grow, what we want to try and do is like have more of a slider where we can just ramp up and ramp down like how many clients we sign, which gives you full control over the growth. And with ads, like, we could have that. But the truth with ads at the moment is, we want to run an extremely lean operation with low overheads and extremely high margins, which we're doing at the moment. And ads, they kind of interfere with that philosophy. And B, like, our clients aren't running ads. We don't have, like, most agencies we work with, like, they would struggle to pay for ads. And so like, we want to have our boots on the ground. We want to be in the trenches with and for our clients. And so when our clients have a deliverability issue with their email, and then it ramps up for like 30 people, we can host a coaching call and say, hey, here's exactly how we fixed it like a week ago. Whereas if we're in this echo chamber of running ads, like, this is the problem. And this is why, I'm not to insult competition, because it's not the best way to sign business. But I think the reason a lot of coaches and consultants in my industry struggle is because the only way they've ever signed clients is through personal brand and ads, right? People need organic strategies, outbound organic strategies that are efficient and cheap to run. But the coaches they buy from have never had to use them. So like, they hop into the program and then they're like, oh, like, how do I add a Loom GIF thumbnail? And then the coach is like, I don't know, I've never done it before. So whereas we can help people with individual things. So our philosophy is, by doing it, we can teach it, basically.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that was also one of the mistakes that I made early on, is that I signed up with a program, which I believe you're familiar with as well. And that very well-known famous program. Sorry?
Name no names. We all know.
Name no names, but we both know. And there, in hindsight, I know that the person who's running the program was not at all doing the activities he was advising, right? He was purely, as you said, personal brand and ads. and that's it. Definitely YouTube. He could definitely advise on how to do good YouTube videos, but like his instructions on how to do lumpy mail or LinkedIn prospecting simply didn't land because it was completely out of touch, right? It was just effectively something that he had read somewhere.
Very much out of date. That's the problem.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
We're in the process right now of re-recording the entire program because we made it a year ago. It's too old. It still works. Like people still hop in and get great results, but like that's not good enough. Like the Loom system we have, like we could leave it and it would be fine for like 2 or 3 years. But in the last year, we've learned a lot about Loom and we've been doing it ourselves. And we found new copies and new scripts and new variables and new tools. And like we want to just keep the thing like relentlessly up to date. So like my day at the moment is just nothing but program recording, which I enjoy doing. So, but yeah, like the contrary to that is most people build a product, like their entire business model is built off of one piece of copy that they find works, and then everybody floods to it and it stops working. We want to avoid that.
Yeah. So again, about outreach, I very often talk to people, especially LinkedIn is rife with this kind of advice that, oh, you should just do content, right? And then there's very famous and well-known influencers who just preach this up and down, just put out great content and people will come to you. It seems to me that you have quite strong, or maybe you don't have strong opinions on this, but definitely you recommend to simply focus on sales, i.e. do outbound, polarize people between those who don't have the problem and quickly find only those who do, and do not focus on nurturing the potentials with content, but initially just get clients through the door via outbound. Did I get that right?
Yeah. So like, I think people have a mistaken view here because like content is a long-term game. Outbound is a short-term game. You need both to survive in business, right? So I think like the problem people have is they have this like either like it's like politics, we're right or we're left, right? Nobody sits in the middle. I mean, I do, but like with getting clients, people are like, I do inbound or I do outbound. It's like, well, if you do inbound, that's going to take a long time. Like it's the nature of inbound. Like if you observe any YouTube channel, it's like slow, quick, right? And like it takes time to build momentum in those platforms. So like the best thing to do is just do both, but accept the fact that the majority of your business in the short term will come from the outbound. The irony is that they feed into each other. So like,
of course,
when you reach out to someone and they book a call and then they see the YouTube channel and then they start watching, it's kind of both. But I think that's the philosophy I have. Is it's like the other thing about inbound is it's not as trackable. It's not direct. Like if you're starting, outbound is the way to go because bloody hell, you can just go from like we started making like 10-20 grand a month with Imperium before we even had a product. Like we literally just had a guarantee. We had NorthFlow Consulting and we had like I remember pulling up a Trello board of what the product was going to look like and what we'd completed. And we sell that for like 3 grand a pop and just said to people, it'll be released in like, the end of like February when we were starting or something, in March, whatever. And like we just built up like a cash reserve. Like we were like, before we sell this thing, do people need it? Will they buy it without even existing? And then we proved that, and then we just got to work. So, yeah.
Awesome. Exactly. Do you get much resistance from clients that they say, "Oh, I tried this outbound and it didn't work for me"? Maybe your methods are so good that they work instantly. But do you sometimes get that kind of resistance that they say, "I don't want to bother people. I don't want to do outbound and like spam people"? Do you sometimes get that?
Sometimes. I mean, the nature of our approach and the nature of our systems are very they're not quality-based, but they're not quantity-based. They're different, right? They're idiosyncratic. They're multidisciplined and they don't really piss people off too much. And like, if a client comes to us and they're like, oh, I'm selling these looms. And like the other day, someone told me to go away. I'm like, so? And then they're like, you just stay silent and then just let them sit with what that means. And it's like, well, why do you care? And then they don't really realize why they care. And then they come to the conclusion after a while that like, I'm like, how many people said they were interested? It's like, oh, I got like, I don't know, 8 replies. Okay. How many people told you to go away? Like 2. So you've got a not interested rate of 2% and a positive reply rate of 8%. What are you choosing to focus on? You ask them the question and they come to the conclusion themselves that like, actually doesn't matter. We have this a lot with like clients that are like, they'll do like LinkedIn and they'll do email as well. They're like, oh, what happens if I send an email to the same person twice? Or what? And I'm just like, well, what happens if you do? And then you just ask them and then they're like, well, Nothing, I suppose. Like maybe someone gets a little bit annoyed and then they forget about it, and then it's that. So people focus on these little micro details. Like the nature of outbound is we're by nature, we are pain avoidant humans, right? All humans are. Outbound is painful. So people start to make these little micro problems to rationalize not doing it. And they think the problem is why they're not doing it, but they've manifested that problem unconsciously because they want to avoid the work. And that's a pretty interesting thing to see. So
yeah, it seems like you have quite a Socratic approach when it comes to coaching, where you sort of ask questions back instead of telling people what to do or being sort of directive. It seems that you kind of try them to get to the conclusion themselves. Is that right?
yeah, I think it's a mix of both, because sometimes people need to be told, where it's like, sometimes someone will be so sort of like in their own head that they need someone to offer the perspective. But yeah, we take more of like it's like Socratic sort of critical thinking, critical reasoning process, where someone's like, this is this problem. I'm like, well, why does the problem exist? And they're like, because of this. I'm like, well, why does that happen? And they're like, because of this. And then it's like, well, why does that happen? Because of this. And then like, we had the other day a client who was like having this issue with niche selection. He picked a niche, but then he realized there weren't enough clients, and like we just dug into it and we were like, well, why don't you think there's enough clients? He's like, well, I don't know, I haven't looked. I'm just like, okay, we'll go and look. And then we looked at it. He's like, oh, there's like 90,000 people in this niche. So like sometimes like just I mean, like you've got the old like Socrates, like the 5 whys, but I prefer, because if someone arrives at their own opinion, then it's their idea and they're more likely to act on it. Now, if someone's paid you for information, then you are subconsciously in their mind an authority, and they will trust what you tell them. They will do what you tell them to do. However, when that person that you trust and have authority extracts information from you, the idea has way more credence, and you're more likely to act on it, because, well, we don't act out of accordance with our own ideas. If we come up with an idea, by nature we fall in love with it, because that's how we work. So yeah, I prefer to like coach people by, sometimes I'll just be like, look, man, like if someone asks me a basic question, like, should I do this in my copy? I'm like, no. But then if it's more like mindset based and they're a bit scattered, I'll be like, well, why is this a problem? And then it usually just boils down to some belief they have. And I'm like, well, why do you have this belief? And they're like, I don't know. When I was 5, my dad told me that real estate agents don't have much money. And then we realized that the entire business was broken because of one thing someone said one time when they were 6, right? You can't get to the bottom of things without questioning, but sometimes it's appropriate to just say like,
So if you could take your current skill set back to the time when you were, and you didn't mention it here, but you mentioned it in your video, when you were cold calling people from your car, if you could take your current skill set, what would you be doing differently? Would you just start doing the cold outbound, the looms and so on, or would you still do some cold calling?
Well, I think I'd still cold call, because it's a pretty direct, like the cool thing about cold calling is it's like, it really toughens your skin.
Yeah.
Like seriously, like what the bigger benefit of cold calling is, like, it's not, don't worry about the clients. It's the verbal dexterity, it's the fluency of speech, it's being able to think on your feet, it's being able to handle rejection and remove emotional attachment to other people's opinions. Like those are the outcomes of cold calling, which will make you far more money in the long run than, like, you only have to look at it. Nobody does it for a reason. It's because it's painful. If you can do it and you can master cold calling, everything looks like a walk in the park. If I was going back and restarting, if someone stripped me of like Imperium and NorthFlow, like I would basically do what I said. I would just shut my eyes and throw a pin at a board and pick a niche. And then I would just start sending looms. I'd start making cold calls. Like the biggest mistake new agency owners make is doing anything but outreach. So like they'll build a website, or they'll build an onboarding funnel, or they'll put together their sales script. I'm like, you don't need to build systems that facilitate client conversions if you haven't converted clients. Like it just doesn't make sense. So people want this, then they're like, oh, like, I spent like a day designing my logo for my mug. And then you're like, God. So like I would, like, honestly, like if I had to restart and I could, go from like 0 to 10 grand a month in like 2 weeks. Like the way I'd do it is just like, I'd do looms, I do LinkedIn, I do cold calling, I'd start posting daily as well. And I'd make like 200 cold calls a day, because you can do that quite quickly if you're efficient. I do like 30 looms a day. I would do as many LinkedIn connections as I could, and I'd just start writing posts. And like, if you think about that, like if you have good approaches and a good method, and you reach out to like 400 people in your market a day, you're going to sign clients quite quickly, because you don't need that. Like, even if you send 20 looms, let's say you have like a 5% appointment booking rate, right? And you send 20 looms a day, then you'll be booking no, that's not quite right, actually. Even if it's like 2.5%, you send 100 emails a day, you book an appointment a day, you're literally like 1,000 emails away from what is that like? Well, a bunch of clients, basically. People overcomplicate it, like just volume. So I would just go through outreach for like a month, basically.
Okay. And what would you say your clients, do you see a common theme? What do they mostly get wrong about client acquisition when they join you? Is there a common theme? Do you see like the top 2 or top 3 things that they get wrong?
The main thing is the philosophy and the frameworks and the perception of it. It's the paradigm, the belief system they approach it with. So like we've got a video in our program called the Outreach Epiphany, which walks people through like how to shift your paradigm and mindset in accordance with outreach. And it might, at first glance, it seems like this sort of like hippie woo-wah, like change your mind, change your life sort of thing. But like most people think outreach is hard. And it's impossible to behave in a way that isn't in conjunction with what you believe to be true. And so if you genuinely have convinced yourself that booking appointments is a hard activity to do, then you will always act as if it is a hard activity to do. It's the same with people who do sales calls. They're like, oh, sales is really difficult. Well, of course, sales is difficult. If you think it's difficult, you're going to make it difficult. So like I see like there's a word called praxis, which denotes giving action to idea. And so like the biggest mistake I see is people have gone through like the program you might have gone through, for example. We've got quite a few people in our program from there. Or like they've tried to do cold email, and then like, as far as they're concerned, they've got evidence that cold outreach doesn't work. And then like any activity they try to take, they will always self-sabotage it because unconsciously they think it isn't going to work. And like they don't want it to work because we have to be right as humans. So the first thing we have to do is get into people's minds and be like, can you actually just like grab, like we do this with clients. I'm like, look, get a sheet of paper and write down everything you believe to be true about organic attraction. Everything. Don't like leave no stone unturned, like spend like a whole 2 hours in a dark room with a pen and paper, writing down every belief you have. And then what you'll find is those beliefs are the thing that actually contribute to the person's lack of success. Because like, like one person was like, oh, it's rude to send a Calendly link. And then that's just a belief they have. And then so they never send calendar links. And it's like, well, of course, you're not going to get meetings if you don't send calendar links. Like it's much less efficient. So that's the big thing I see is like people's approach. And then the other thing is just the whole monkey see, monkey do nature of it. Like, or not understanding psychology. That's a big one. Because appointment booking doesn't really exist. It's just applied understanding of psychology that manifests into meetings. Like people are like, oh, it's all about like lem list or the right email copy or my signature or the title or the subject line. Like none of that matters. Like the only thing that matters is understanding how human beings work. Because if you think about what outreach actually is, like you can boil it all the way down to a couple of things. Like if you think about appointment booking, like what's an appointment, right? An appointment is a physical manifestation of an agreed time on a calendar, right? Now that calendar is on a human's calendar and it's someone's time. So we get immediately to the time thing. Like an appointment booking is basically getting someone's time. Now, how do we get someone to give them our time? Well, we have to get them to agree that it's the right thing to do. How do we get them to agree it's the right thing to do? We have to resonate with them, and basically like people will spend time if they perceive that you can solve a problem they face, because that's how humans spend their time, is trying to solve problems and eradicate pain. So you then come down to like this whole like, how do we get people to agree? Well, you resonate with them. How do we resonate with someone? We have to understand their pain. How do we understand their pain? We understand who they are and why they have this pain. And like, so people just think that appointment booking is like is subject lines and lem lists, but it's just applied understanding of how humans work.
Yeah.
And that's what
I really liked your recent video about where you say the real secret to good outreach is simply the credibility and quality of your offer. Like if you're confident enough, then you can offer, let's say, money back guarantee. If like my system doesn't work for you, you're going to get full refund, no questions asked. Then this is going to make like 99% of your success is going to be based on that, rather than small ancillary aspects of which email service you use or something like that.
It's like you can personalize as many first lines as you want, but if what you're selling doesn't give people confidence, nothing matters. Exactly. And I think like this, it's like a huge shift, because all markets, when you observe them over time, gravitate to value, and value is like solving problems and eradicating pain from people's lives. And like people want to do that in a way that basically leaves them exposed to no risk. And so like the best copy I've seen is literally just a good offer. And like it's interesting. People are like, "Oh, Charlie, what's your loom script? Like, how do you record your looms? And like, how long are your looms?" I'm like, "Look, my loom is literally just the offer. Like, I'm not even joking. It's like a minute long. It's just like explaining the offer and how it works." And like people think that they need to have like that. I receive cold emails all the time, and people will try all this fancy stuff. Whereas in reality, it's just like, I can get you this. If it doesn't work, I don't get paid. And like we're observing now that like, especially in e-commerce, that like if you can't work on like a pay on results basis or a commission basis, or can't guarantee something crazy, you're not going to book meetings. And I tell clients that, and then sometimes they get annoyed. I'm like, look, I'm not telling you that, the market's telling you that. And if you can't offer something better than what, like if you imagine your prospect's inbox is going to be full of other people emailing them, the only thing they will use to decide who to talk to is who has the stronger offer. Now there will be some elements where like you have a cool loom video or you do this and like it appeals to them, but when you average it out, it's just going to basically be the offer statement. Like if you go to a business owner and just call up a business owner and just say, "Hey John, listen, you don't know me, but I run a company and we can help you get more members. The cool thing is that I only get paid when money enters your bank account. It's completely risk-free. Are you looking for more members? And also, would you be open to that sort of option? There's no setup fee." But you call someone up and say, "Hey, John, I've got Boris Johnson here, the Prime Minister of the UK. He's confirming that if you give me $10, I'll give you $100,000. Like it's all, you get the point. Like it's just having good offer, basically the strongest premise of any copy.
And that also ties into my last question, mindful of time. You've strongly advocated for the one call close. I'm more used to the 15 minutes and then the 60 minutes, mainly because at least in my experience, people do need time. Like the idea of I need to think about it is very often a legitimate thing where people indeed do need to think about it, because also we just met and they have, they've maybe only learned about me in the last 48 hours. But that's why I do that. Would you say that the quality of your offer also helps to convert on the sales call, where you would say, number one, it's the fact that, offer split payments. That's probably also another thing that contributes to it. So the risk is perceived lower. But also the fact that you, for example, offer the money back guarantee definitely helps people to get over the line, right? And decreases this.
So like a strong offer will, for lack of better words, lubricate your entire sales process. Like your show rate will be better. Your questioning will be better. So we do one call closes because 2 call closes are inefficient and they're unnecessary. Now, when it comes to I need to think about it, what happens with objections is there's 2 outcomes. Either you buy the prospect's objection or they buy your rebuttal. People don't need to think about decisions, right? They think they do because that's how we've been conditioned and reared. But our philosophy for objection handling is we will know after 45 minutes whether or not they're a good fit for us. And we will know if we can truly help them. If we know we can help them, then we will do everything we can to get them on board to make it happen, because it's within our moral obligation to do so, because we can change their life. And so like, my understanding of the 2 call close is it's a manifestation of pain avoidance. People don't want to handle the objections. And it's another one of these belief things where like, that would be an interesting belief statement for you, and I'm challenging it, but it could be like, I believe prospects need time to think about it. And then it's like, well, why does that happen? And it happens because we sell as we buy. So the reason that you think that's how it needs to be done is because that's how you would do it. And so what happens is you start projecting how you would buy onto all your other prospects. And then of course they need time to buy it because, well, you wouldn't make a decision immediately. And I think that the 2 call close, I put it this way. We've got a 40%, my sales rep who started in the middle of March has a 30% sales conversion rate on 1 call closes. So I've seen too much evidence of it working. You just have to accept the fact that objections happen and you just have to handle them, and they're possible. That's the thing. And like, people don't need to think about it. People just, that translates directly to, there's something about your service that I lack confidence in, but I don't want to tell you what it is because I don't want to upset you. And then like, what happens is you think they need time, so you give them time, but all they're doing is just manifesting this doubt, and then you need to root it out. And basically, I could talk about objections for like 3 hours, but
Awesome, man. This was a blast. We had so many people commenting on it, what a great and illuminating conversation this was. I can show a couple of them. But they're definitely going to be there.
Hour. Oh my goodness, gracious me!
Yeah.
Where does the time do you find this when you produce content, Michael, where you really dive into something, you're talking to someone that you find interesting, like we've been doing here, or you're recording some sort of like video and then you look and then like a whole hour's gone? Like, doesn't feel like an hour, does it?
Definitely. I had this recently when I was sort of pre-scripting a video. Do you do any scripting of your videos, or do you just start talking?
Just start talking.
Wow, that's pretty good. I still have to script.
Yeah, I kind of have like a sometimes if the video is complicated, I'll have some notes. But for the most part, like the way I work with YouTube is, I feel like my philosophy for good YouTube content, and we can close on this because I know you've got to go. But like my philosophy is, it's like people want to watch you think. So when I'm creating a YouTube video, like I have the idea and the topic and I might understand it, but what I'm really doing is just explaining it. And by doing that, I'm explaining my thought process, and you can't really script that. So like some people, and it's also how you produce really deep, rich content, is because it's basically just a video of you articulating your thought patterns for like 20 minutes, and it's really authentic and it resonates with people. So I find that to be quite helpful. But yeah, I don't. Yes.
Absolutely. And that is also the secret of the success of Jordan Peterson's lectures.
He's just standing up on stage, and obviously the dude's an absolute monster. Like he's got all these ideas, but like he says at the start of his like lectures, he's like, okay guys, so the purpose of this is just for me to think. So you can sit back and watch, and then he just articulates and like your tangent, and then you'll bring it back. And it's just you're just sitting there watching someone just unpack a really complicated idea and simplifying it, which is what I'm trying to do with my channel. And it's nice. Like people are like, I get this a lot where people are like, oh, how do you edit your videos? How do you get out all the ums and the ahs? I'm like, I don't really have any. I just talk, and some reason it works. I don't really know why, but
yeah. Exactly. So that's a great takeaway among many others, but it's like, if you are not yet good at producing content and at just speaking al fresco into the camera, what you need to focus on is not rather focusing on fixing the ums and ahs, but the quality of your thinking.
Yeah, I think like the way because I practice my articulate ability quite a lot, helps to read a lot because then you understand it. But what I used to do when I would read is it became a habit where like every time I found a new word, and I didn't understand it, I'd look up the definition of the word, but then I'd also look at all the synonyms of that word and the definitions of all of those. And so then you've got all of these like words that you can just string together to articulate. But then like I just started like, sometimes I'll just open voice notes and just talk and talk and talk. And it won't be about anything in particular. Like I'll just like, if I've got like an idea, like on a mindset thing for the module, I'll just start talking about it and then I'll just flesh it out. But like if you're new to producing content, like it does help to have like a script and to have a thing. But the best thing to do is just record sort of like basic videos first. And over time, but the quality of your thinking like is the quality of your content, in my opinion.
And the quality of your thinking is clearly excellent. Where can people go to learn more about you other than clicking on your name under this video?
Yeah, so I've thought about this because I've had a couple of requests for interviews, and I don't really want to send people through to a funnel, because that's what everybody does, right? So anyone expecting a webinar or a case study funnel, I'm sorry to disappoint you. Well, you're probably not disappointed. Best thing to do is just pop onto YouTube and just type my name and just Charlie Morgan Agency. And then if you like what you see, you can subscribe. And then from subscribing, if you just check out some of my videos, hopefully there's enough exchange in value for you to feel like you could benefit more from learning about how a program works. I'd rather just basically send people to a safe place where they can keep consuming content to build familiarity. And then if they feel they like the look of it, they can just book a call, and could be the best thing they ever do. Could not be a good fit, but just go to YouTube, honestly. I mean, there is actually a discovery call link and stuff in the bio of my LinkedIn profile, but there's no obligation to click it. I'd rather people get some value first. And of course, they need to subscribe to your channel or this podcast or however it works. It'd be amazing.
Definitely. The link to your YouTube channel will definitely be in the show notes. Charlie, thanks so much. It's been a blast.
Absolute pleasure, my friend. Hopefully we can do it again.
Thanks. Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.